Did you know about these 5 true horror stories about Home Alone? Don't watch these horror stories alone, especially the last one. I live in a 2-story mother-daughter house, meaning it's basically 2 separate apartments under one roof. My sister has the downstairs. I've got the upstairs. She's rarely home these days, usually staying over at her boyfriend's place about 20 miles away. I'm 30 years old, and I'd like to think I'm not the kind of guy who gets rattled being alone in my own home, but, truthfully, sometimes the silence gets to me. That night, I was alone upstairs, sprawled on the couch in the living room, watching a horror movie. My part of the house is one big open layout. The living room, dining area, and kitchen all in one continuous space. My couch sits in the middle of the room, the TV in front of me, and a large empty area stretching behind my back. If you've ever been alone, watching something creepy, with a wide dark space at your back, you know the feeling of nagging urge to keep glancing over your shoulder. I kept catching myself doing exactly that, even though the only light in the room was the flicker from the TV. Shadows swam along the walls. When the movie ended, I shook it off, brushed my teeth, switched off every light, and went to bed. I slept for maybe 2 hours before I woke up for no clear reason. It was just after 1 a.m., and then I heard it. A voice. Downstairs. It was my sister's voice. Not calling from outside, but from inside the house. At first, I couldn't make out the words. My half-asleep brain just assumed she'd come home unexpectedly, maybe calling up to me, or arguing with her boyfriend. Still groggy, I got out of bed and stepped into the pitch-black hallway. I flicked on the hall light, padded through the living room, and as I reached the top of the stairs, I heard her again. This time, it was clearer. She was calling my name. The sound came from her apartment below. I started down the stairs, calling back, "What is it?" The foyer was dark, and for some reason, I couldn't find the light switch right away. My head was still foggy from sleep. I moved through the small hallway into her kitchen until my hand finally found the switch. The light buzzed to life, dim at first, slowly brightening, and spilled into her entire downstairs. Her living room. The kitchen. Empty. No sign of her. No sign of her boyfriend. I checked her bedroom. Nothing. The bed was perfectly made, exactly as she'd left it days ago. I called her name louder this time. No response. And then a noise. Something dropped onto the floor in her bedroom. The same bedroom I had just checked. The one that was empty. Every hair on my body stood up. I didn't go back in. I didn't investigate. Instead, I walked ran back upstairs, shut my bedroom door, locked it, and grabbed my phone. I tried calling her, but she didn't answer. I sat there, wide-eyed, phone clutched in my hand, convincing myself I had imagined it. Eventually, I must have drifted off. In the morning, I woke up to a text from her. "Why did you call me at 1 a.m.? I asked if she'd come home last night. She said no, she was still at her boyfriend's place." I went back downstairs to her bedroom to see if anything had fallen. The floor was clear. Nothing out of place. I keep telling myself it was all in my head, maybe a vivid dream or some weird half-asleep hallucination. But here's the thing. I've never hallucinated before. I don't have sleep disorders. And the sound of her voice was too real. So was the noise in her room. The alternative that someone or something was in the house that night is something I'd rather not think about. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I find myself listening. Just in case I hear her voice again. When I was a kid, my mom worked overnight shifts as a registered nurse. She was a single parent for most of my childhood, which meant I spent a lot of nights alone after my older brother left for college. One weekend, when I was about 14, she was on another night shift. I had invited a girl over to Molly, someone I'd been talking to for a while. We hung out, watched movies, and just enjoyed the night. But her parents didn't like her staying out late, so after a couple of hours, she had to leave. 10 minutes after she was gone, the house felt too quiet. I was in my bedroom upstairs, TV still on, when I heard the sound of something scraping outside. It was the distinct dragging sound of a chair being pulled across the wooden deck. My bedroom window overlooked the backyard, so I got up and peeked outside. Someone was sitting in one of our deck chairs. Thinking maybe Molly had come back for some reason, I called out her name. The figure looked up. It wasn't Molly. I dropped out of sight immediately, heart pounding. The deck was bathed in shadows, and I couldn't make out his face clearly, but I knew I didn't recognize him. Panicked, I pulled out my phone and sent a message to my group chat, asking if any of my friends were outside messing with me. The ones who replied said no and asked what I was talking about. Not that I really believed my friends would pull something like this. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I slowly crept back to the window. He was still there, sitting perfectly still, staring straight up at my window. It was definitely a man, and he knew I was watching. I ducked away again, this time turning off the TV so the glow wouldn't give me away. My room sank into complete darkness. I curled up in bed, hugging my knees, barely breathing. The window was open, and I was terrified that even the sound of movement might let him know I was still there. I stayed like that for what felt like forever, probably 5 minutes. Surely, he'd be gone by now. I took a deep breath and peeked outside again. He hadn't moved. Just sitting there, locked onto me. Instead of retreating this time, I forced myself to call out, "What do you want?" His shoulders began to shake like he was laughing, but it was silent at first. Then a faint wheezing sound drifted up from the deck, as if he was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. My skin crawled. I told him to go away, then stepped back from the window. I couldn't bring myself to call the police. I don't know why, maybe I was too scared to even speak to anyone. I left my room and sat at the top of the stairs, trying to listen. That's when I heard the back door being pushed. He was trying to get inside. I bolted back to my room, slammed the window shut, yanked the curtains closed, and crouched out of sight. Moments later, I heard the front doorknob rattling. Then the door creaked under his weight as he tried to shove it open. It only lasted a few seconds before he stopped. If those doors hadn't been locked, I don't want to imagine what would have happened. At 14, I was small, weak, and not a fighter. I stayed in my room for the rest of the night, not daring to move until my mom came home around 9 in the morning. When I told her, she was furious I hadn't called 911. Looking back now, she was right. It was a stupid mistake. And I've asked myself countless times since then what would have happened if I hadn't looked outside, or if he'd managed to get in. I was 10 years old when it happened on a Friday night I'll never forget, the night I truly believed I was going to die. We were a family of 5. My older brother was 14, my little sister was 5. That evening, my brother had gone out with friends, and I was in my room playing a Star Wars video game when I heard my mom cry out from downstairs. Her voice cracked in a way I had never heard before. I dropped the controller and ran to see what was wrong. She was on the phone, tears running down her face. The hospital had called and said my brother had been hit by a car. Everything after that felt like a blur. My dad rushed to get coats, my mom scooped my little sister from her room, and they told me they needed to get to the hospital immediately. They asked if I'd be okay staying home alone. I said yes. In truth, I didn't want to see my brother hurt. And they didn't want to leave my little sister behind, so they took her with them. My dad tried to calm my mom, assuring her he'd be okay. That made me feel a little better. My brother did recover completely, but the accident was the reason I ended up alone in the house that night. After they left, I kept playing my game for a couple of hours. Eventually, I turned off the TV and switched to my Game Boy, lying in bed with my door shut. That's when I heard the front door open. It was past midnight. At first, I thought it was my parents coming back. I waited, listening for their voices, or maybe the sound of my brother on crutches. But nothing came. Minutes passed. Still no sound of anyone coming up the stairs. Something felt wrong. I quietly opened my bedroom door and stepped to the banister overlooking the living room. The lights were off, but I could still make out shapes in the darkness. 3 tall figures were standing in the middle of our living room. They weren't my family. I froze. My legs wouldn't move at first. Then, as quietly as I could, I retreated into my room and shut the door, but I knew that faint click of the latch had given me away. I slipped into my closet, closing the door behind me, and crouched down behind bags of old clothes and boxes stacked high. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. The silence stretched on and on until my bedroom door creaked open. Footsteps entered. Slow. Deliberate. I couldn't tell if it was one person or more. They stopped by my bed. I heard the soft rustle of blankets being moved, then nothing. The footsteps started again toward the closet. They stopped. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then, the closet door opened. I held my breath so tightly it hurt. I didn't dare look up. I didn't move. The door stayed open for what felt like an eternity, maybe 20 seconds before it closed again. Footsteps retreated. Out of the room. Only then did I risk raising my head. From where I was crouched, it hit me. I might have been visible to them. But they left. It was at least another hour before I heard my parents return. I ran downstairs, shaking, and saw the front door still ajar. They had stolen valuables, electronics, jewelry, but somehow, they hadn't touched me. My parents had left in such a hurry for the hospital that they never locked the door. Even now, I wonder if the person who opened that closet saw me? Did they just decide I wasn't worth it? Or did I survive only because they hadn't noticed me at all? Either way, I know how close I came to disappearing that night. I was a teenager the summer this happened, one of the only times I had my parents' house entirely to myself. They didn't travel much, but my mom's wealthy friend had invited them on an expenses-paid trip. I was an only child, so I stayed home in our quiet neighborhood in Newark, Ohio. The place was secluded, our backyard opened into dense woods, and the street out front saw maybe a handful of cars all day. We had a big deck overlooking the tree line, a small fish pond, and an above-ground pool. It was a Thursday night in July 2013. I'd been sitting on the deck, music playing through a speaker, smoking a little weed. The air was warm, and the crickets were loud. That's when I heard it. A voice. It came from somewhere in the woods. I paused the music, listening, but nothing followed. I shrugged it off, turned the music back up, and then I heard it again. A man's voice. Hey, over here. The woods started about 20 or 30 yards from the deck, and that's where the sound had come from. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. At first, I thought maybe it was just kids playing some night game like Manhunt. But then it called out again. Hey, over here. We need help. That second part made me uneasy. Straight in front of you. Please come help us. It was coming from dead ahead in the trees. This time, it was obvious the voice was meant for me. I called back. Who's out there? We just need help, the voice answered. We're stuck in the woods. I frowned. What do you mean, stuck? Just please come help. Straight in front of you. For some reason, I got up. I stepped down from the deck and crossed the grass toward the woods, calling out, I'm coming, where are you? Instant reply, right in front of you. I see you. That stopped me. My skin prickled. Are you alone, or with someone? Silence. I stood there for a moment, then slowly began backing away toward the house, keeping my eyes on the tree line. I didn't like the feeling in my gut. Something was wrong. I reached the deck again. The voice didn't call out anymore. And that was when it really sank in that if they could see me, they couldn't be stuck. People don't get trapped in the woods 20 yards from a backyard. I went inside and locked every door. I was sitting in the living room when I heard it again. This time it was closer. The voice wasn't coming from the woods anymore. It was in the backyard. I heard water splashing, maybe the pool, maybe the pond. I ran to the window and peeked out. At first, I saw nothing. Then the voice called, "I see you," followed by a laugh. That's when I spotted at least one man. He was crouched behind the pool, only his head visible. His hair was dark, medium length, but it was too shadowy to make out his face. I quickly shut the blinds, heart pounding. I figured if I ignored him, maybe he'd lose interest. He seemed like the kind of person who thrived on getting a reaction. But my breaking point came fast. A sudden, violent pounding rattled the window I'd just covered. The man was screaming, "Help!" I shouted back at the top of my lungs, "Get the hell out of here, freak! The police are coming!" I screamed it over and over, trying to sound more unhinged than he was. Through the glass, I could hear him laughing. The sound slowly faded, as if he were walking away. I sank onto the couch, shaking and breathless, listening for any sign he was still there. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Finally, it was quiet. That night, I still managed to sleep mostly thanks to the weed, but I've thought about it many times since. If I hadn't been high, would I have recognized the danger sooner? And just how long had he been out there, watching me from the dark? I'm 23, still living at home with my parents. One afternoon, I was outside in the driveway, shooting hoops. The sun was dipping lower, and the house behind me was quiet. Just me, the basketball, and the echo of it bouncing off the concrete. That's when I saw her. Upstairs. In one of our windows. A woman. Not my mom. Not my sister. A stranger. Our eyes met for half a second before she stepped back, disappearing from sight. I froze mid-dribble, my heart suddenly pounding. After a moment, I dropped the ball and went inside. I tore through the upstairs, first the lounge room, every bedroom, the bathroom, every closet. Nothing. Then downstairs, living room, kitchen, dining room, guest room, still nothing. The only place left was the basement. It's small, just a couple couches, a bar, and 2 closets. I didn't really think she could be down there, but I checked anyway. The first closet was empty. I stood in front of the second one for a moment, my hand hovering over the handle. My stomach knotted. This was the last possible hiding place. I yanked the door open and lunged forward, shoving myself inside as if I could take her by surprise. But all I hit was a wall of coats and hangers. Nothing. Still, I knew what I'd seen. I wasn't imagining it. I went back upstairs and shouted loud enough for the whole block to hear, "Whoever's in here, get the hell out." The neighbor from next door came over, looking concerned. I told him what happened and how I'd seen a woman in the window watching me play basketball. He stepped inside and helped me search the house again. Still nothing. The back door was unlocked from when I'd gone to grab the ball earlier. We figured she must have slipped out that way. After my neighbor left, I locked everything, called my parents, and told them what happened. They weren't thrilled but told me to make sure nothing was missing. I checked, thankfully, everything was still in place. That night, I did one last sweep of the house before going to bed. I lay there, restless, my mind replaying that brief moment at the window. Most people never see a stranger inside their home. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Eventually, I started to drift off. Then I heard something. It was faint at first, a subtle noise over the hum of my ceiling fan. I didn't roll over immediately, but the sounds grew more distinct. Humans. I turned onto my side. She was there, crawling out from under my bed. The stranger stood up straight, looming over me. I screamed louder than I had earlier and launched myself at her. We crashed to the floor, my hands clamping around her throat as I demanded to know who she was. That's when the doorbell rang. My neighbor. Again. I hauled the woman, tall, dirty, wild-eyed, toward the front door. She thrashed and clawed at me, leaving 2 deep scratches in my arm that I still have today. When I opened the door, my neighbor stepped in and helped me hold her down while I called the police. She screamed and cursed at us the entire time, spitting threats and insults, her voice hoarse. She looked and acted like someone in the middle of a bad meth crash. When the officers arrived, One of them recognized her immediately. They'd dealt with her before. Her name was Karen. I watched with grim satisfaction as they cuffed her and put her in the back of the squad car. That night, I still couldn't sleep, but the fear was different now. Somehow, underneath it, there was this strange feeling of relief, even victory. I had seen her. I had caught her. And I wasn't the one who ended up leaving in the back of a police car.